When I first became a rector, I was 33 years old. I had had wonderful experiences working in the church, first as a lay leader, and then as a seminarian in charge of education at All Saints in Hoboken, and a truly charmed time as an assistant rector in Upper Montclair. And still, like any young professional, I was eager to become my own boss, excited to become a rector, and eager to have a first church. I had been dreaming of what being a rector would be like, and I couldn't wait to get to work. Within a week of starting at my first church, one of the leaders of the church became verbally abusive to me. She would call me on the phone about 7:30 at night, beginning to talk about a problem on the vestry or in the committees, and then that quickly would lead into personal attacks on me, complete with abusive language. It became harder and harder for me to pick up the phone because I knew what would happen. Within a month, she had begun embellishing the facts of our conversation and lying about what I had said to members of the church. It was a brutal time. And for the first months of my time as a rector, I was busy deflecting the worst kind of rumors, outright lies, and unchecked hostility. I was scared and confused. I had never seen Christians behave in those ways before, and quite honestly, if I had had any other options, I probably would have either quit or moved. But I was 33 years old, and I had just moved my 10-year-old son to a new state. He had started his first year of middle school in a new town, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that I wanted to leave. So we stayed. And for the first and thankfully only time in my life, I was looked at with suspicions and sometimes outright hostility by the people in my parish who I was supposed to pastor. It was an awful time. And getting through it taught me a good deal about how to be a pastor during difficult days, and a lot about how to be a Christian. The first thing that it taught me was that you can be kind without being a victim. That was hard for me. I had to learn an important lesson. For me, that meant that I had to learn that I could speak the truth about my situation, not always to my parish, but with colleagues, bishops, wardens, and my vestry. I was clear with myself that I did not deserve this and was not responsible for others' behavior. I didn't try to get even with the person, but I was clear that I wanted and deserved for it to stop. I also learned that the loudest voices in a church are not the only voices. I had people during that time that supported me and wanted desperately to believe in my new ministry. When I was being assaulted by a small but vocal group, I wanted to hide. But I learned the importance of remaining in relationship with people, even the most difficult times. I treasured those good, faithful souls who loved their church and were inclined to ignore the voices that wanted to cause trouble. I came to love those who were brave enough to stand up and say, that's not my experience, and that's not my memory of that conversation. trusting that the majority of the church either didn't know or care about the complaints of a few, helped keep me going. But the most important lesson I learned was how to forgive. Forgiveness is not about amnesia, and it's not about denial. Forgiveness is about being willing to move on and not be defined by a hurtful and painful event or relationship. For me, the process that Jesus outlines in today's gospel helped me to get to a place of forgiveness, a place of being ready to move on and not be defined by the conflict with another member of the church. The process in the Gospels is pretty straightforward. If another member of the church wrongs you, first, talk to that person directly. If that doesn't work, include a couple of other members of the community and talk with them about the problem. And finally, if you still can't resolve it, you should involve the whole church. That person, if after all these attempts, if that person cannot understand the harm of their actions, then that person shall be like a Gentile or a tax collector. In other words, you can avoid all unnecessary contact with them. In the words of a beloved friend who was raised in the Bronx, forget about it. But here's the thing. When Jesus says to treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector, any respectable Jew in the first century would understand the clear meaning of that, have nothing more to do with them. But when you read about the ministry of Jesus, you know that it's a little more complicated. He does eat with tax collectors. He does have discussions with Gentiles. He heals them. He listens to them. He comes to respect them. In other words, it seems to me that there is a paradox in today's reading that suggests that while there are people in our lives and even in our churches that it may not be possible to have healthy relationships with, none of those barriers exist for God. For God, there are no untouchables, no sinners that are too far gone for forgiveness or for relationship. And so when we hear that what is bound on earth is bound in heaven, and what is loosed on earth is loosed on heaven, well, perhaps that works both ways. Perhaps God's forgiveness and love should permeate all that we do on the earth, so that what we bind may be holy, and what we loose may be handed over to God, to angels better than we can ever be. May God bless us in all our relationships with one another, that we may be gentle and just, strong and kind, and knowing all the while that we will never get it quite right. Amen.